This episode is sponsored by True Recovery. If you or someone you care for is dealing with addiction, you know that finding a treatment option that works for you can be extremely frustrating. Truth is, every patient's needs are different and constantly evolving. That's why we stand behind True Recovery. Find out more about the range of services at truerecovery.com. I'm woefully aware of how few people know anything about the opioid crises in America. Opioids and the problems they cause are in the headlines daily, but this drug's use actually started thousands of years ago. Chapter 1 begins with the first known use of the poppy by the Neanderthals and features excerpts from an interview with author Kenaz Filan, whose book, The Power of the Poppy, Harnessing Nature's Most Dangerous Plant Ally, chronicles some of the earliest known uses of the opium poppy. It gets confusing sometimes. We talk about opium, which is the direct molecule from the poppy, and opiate, which is a derivative, and opioid, which is a synthetic version of the same molecule. Those are the three categories. We will generally just refer to this as the opium crisis. And now DrDrew.com presents The History of Opium. Part 1. In the Beginning, A History of Opium. The use of the poppy flower has been associated with humankind as far back as the Neanderthals. Existing between 400,000 and 40,000 years ago, these are our closest extinct human relatives. A race of skilled hunters who made tools, wore clothing, controlled fire, lived in nuclear families, and seemed to at least occasionally bury their dead. Given this knowledge, it should come as no surprise that they were able to recognize and exploit the natural resources around them. Neanderthals' use of poppy plants is not yet understood, but fossilized seeds have been found in their settlements. This discovery stands as the first record of the flower use by humans.
About 7,500 years ago, we begin seeing cultivation of poppies. We see, and it appears to have come from a culture in Western Europe. From there, it just starts spreading east very quickly. It spreads from there into the LBK people, linear band ceramic. They made pottery and they grew peas, they grew flax, they grew corn, well, what we would call wheat, and they also grew poppies. And the thing that's interesting is poppies are not an especially efficient food source. I mean, of course, you have poppy seed cake. You can use poppy seed oils for lights, but the most important thing about papaver somniferum is it synthesizes a morphine alkaloid, which affects the opioid receptors in our system. It affects the opioid receptors in our stomach. If you have diarrhea or dysentery, it's a very, very powerful antidiarrheal agent. And if you have pain, it affects the opioid receptors to alleviate pain. It produces some somniphoric effects. It can also produce lucid dreaming states. And we know by the time of the Cretans, that's what it was being sold for and traded for. That appears to have been why we discovered poppies and, why they spread throughout, first Europe, then into Asia. Then you find them in Sumeria about 2,000 years later, where that's a major part of their economy.
The story picks up again during the Neolithic Period. This is 10,200 BC to 4,500 BC, with numerous findings of papaver somniferum, aka the opium poppy, in at least 17 Neolithic settlements throughout Europe. The Neolithic Period, or the New Stone Age, had ushered in an area of farming crops, including poppies. One site in Switzerland revealed that poppies were cultivated there as early as 6,000 years ago. Seeds were likely used in baking and to make oil for cooking and lighting, but anthropologists surmise that they may also have been used for medical and consciousness-altering purposes. Graves at Neolithic site in Spain yielded bags filled with opium poppy capsules, suggesting it was part of a funerary ritual. The first written evidence of opium poppy's use and cultivation is found in the Nippur tablets. Made of clay, these tablets are a record of daily life in Nippur, which was the spiritual center of the city-state of Sumer.
It was important to the city-states of Mesopotamia. It appears on a lot of their religious symbolism. You see quite a few pictures of Inanna with poppy heads. They referred to it as Hulgil, the joy plant. They described how you cultivated it in terraced gardens, how you needed to water it, and how you had to slice the heads to get the substance from it, which we call opium. The technique which they use there is still being used today in Afghanistan.
Sumer is commonly referred to as the Cradle of Civilization because writing was invented there, and it also was in other locales, but it was the first embodiment of the city as we know it. The tablets are written in cuneiform script and document economic concerns, legal matters, and other events of the day. Sometime around 4000 BC, the Sumerians made mention of the poppy plant, which they referred to as Hul-Gil, or the joy plant. Sumer is just one of several city-states that make up what is known as Mesopotamia, an ancient region in western Asia, bordered by the Zagros Mountains and the Arabian Plateau. It corresponds today primarily with Iraq, but it includes parts of Iran, Kuwait, Syria, and Turkey. Sumerians coexisted with Assyrians and Babylonians to make up a larger civilization, a collection of cultures that shared script, gods, and enlightened attitudes about women. Sumer was a fairly advanced civilization, and it's credited with the invention of the wheel, domestication of animals, and irrigation, just to name a few of its contributions. Sumerians valued literacy, developed sophisticated weapons, and sometime around 4000 BC were regularly cultivating opium poppies for trade and medicinal use. It's believed that opium was widely used as an analgesic and was eaten both cooked and in its raw form. Experts speculate that priests used it for ceremonial purposes, and its byproducts were used as a clean-burning fuel. Poppy straw may have been used as animal fodder for livestock, and opium poppy cultivation soon made its way to the Sumerians' neighbors, the Assyrians, who called the opium poppy oratopal, from the Latin term papaver, from which it is likely derived, as well as the Babylonians. They were using as well. The flower's juice was extracted by scraping the head of the poppy prior to its blooming. This allowed the milky sap-like liquid, now called opium latex, to seep out onto it. The substance was collected and placed into pots. Eventually, the practice of poppy cultivation passed on to the Egyptians. In the city of Thebes, they grew vast fields called opium thebacum. That's why the active alkaloid, the organic compound derived from plants, in opium is called thebaine. Evidence shows that large amounts of opium were imported, probably from Cyprus, in jugs that resembled the poppy head. This liquid consisted of wine or water that contained dissolved opium and was likely used as a sedative. It may also have been mixed with spices and or smoke or drunk as an aphrodisiac. An ancient Egyptian medical document called the Ebers Papyrus, circa 1550 BC, details the many therapeutic uses of poppy seeds, which included calming a crying child, treating breast infections, and reducing pain during surgical procedures. It was also used in an eye drop and ointments to treat a broad spectrum of chronic conditions, also treated asthma and diabetes. Indeed, there were some 700 medications containing it. While there is evidence of excessive consumption of beer and wine in ancient Egypt, opium use appears to have been restricted to priests, magicians, and warriors. It's unlikely that it was used recreationally, but there are some arguments to the contrary.
The corn poppy is also known as the British memorial poppy, the red poppy. They have not found hard documentary evidence from the time of the Ebers Papyrus. They have not found poppy seeds. They have not found hard evidence of poppy cultivation. So, there is some controversy about whether the opium poppy they describe is actually papaver somniferum. But what we know is by the time we get to the 18th dynasty, we do have people trading opium poppies. We know that Egypt was trading with Crete, which we know at this time, as I had mentioned earlier, had a large opium industry.
The Egyptian opium trade flourished under the pharaohs Thutmose IV, Akhenaten, and King Tutankhamun, which resulted in Phoenician and Minoans moving into Greece, Carthage, and Europe. Egyptian mythology credits their deity Thoth with the creation of opium, and the image of the poppy appears frequently in Egyptian pictography. These depictions are what occasionally spark opinions that ancient Egyptians used opium recreationally. One such example portrays a pharaoh named Amenophis with wide eyes and dilated pupils, which can be a sign of opiate withdrawal. This and reports that the pharaoh became weaker and deteriorated physically strengthens the hypothesis that he was using. Amenophis' use of opium has not been substantiated, but some experts point to him as a potential case of abuse. Evidence of opium and opium smoking equipment has been found in tombs. By 1100 BC, opium was being cultivated in Cyprus. By this time, growers were using surgical quality knives to score the heads of the poppies. During the same period, Egyptians introduced opium to the Greeks, who consumed it in a variety of ways, including inhalation, suppositories, and medicinal poultices. A concoction of opium and hemlock was used to put the condemned to death, and opium use is described in Greek arts and literature. The poet Hesiod wrote the first account of Greek opium production sometime between 750 and 650 BC, and in a scene in Homer's The Odyssey, there's a feature of a drink called Nepenthes, which some scholars believe may be a reference to opium. In it, Zeus's daughter Helen puts a drug into the wine they are drinking. The unnamed substance is meant to banish sorrows and painful memories with forgetfulness. He also talks about soldiers using it to console themselves over the loss of fellow warriors during battle. Statues of several Greek gods, Hypnos, of sleep, Nyx, of night, and Thanatos, death, commonly wear opium poppy crowns. Greeks ascribed opium with mystical qualities, and priests who used it for religious ceremonies imbued the drug with supernatural qualities.
It was important to the Greeks. It was sacred to Demeter, the goddess who brings agriculture, to Aloysius. It has, with the Cretans, who are like the Minoan civilization, which comes, before and alongside the Mycenaean Greeks. Again, that was a huge industry. For the Greeks, it became medicinal. I believe that it may have been the substance used. They may have made what they call meconium or poppy tea. I believe that may have been the substance which was used to induce the dream sleep in the Eleusinian Mysteries, one of the most famous rites of the classical era. I mean, in the Odyssey, it mentions, Helen says, that Nepenthe, which they describe, sounds very like opium. I would also add, the Isle of the Lotus Eaters, with the people who get so lost in the pleasure they forget who they are. I don't have any problem thinking that's an allusion to opium.
The father of medicine, Hippocrates, advocated opium's spare and controlled use for a variety of medical applications, ranging from diarrhea to epidemics. He also talked about poppy juice being used in opium wine, and a mixture of poppy juice and seed of nettle for narcotic, hypnotic, and cathartic purposes. While he worried about alcohol abuse, he did not seem similarly concerned about opium. Dioscorides, another Greek physician, wrote extensively about opium in his opus De Materia Medica, written between 50 and 70 AD. This 5-volume work addresses the preparations, properties, and testing of herbs and the medications that could be obtained from them. The very word opium may actually be of Greek origin. It may be derived from the Greek word for opos, which means juice, and opion, which means poppy juice. Kenaz Filan will join us again next week when we reveal which famous historical figures introduced opium to Asia and India. I want to thank our staff at Doctor.com, particularly Michelle Poe, for pulling this opium series together. And read the entire series and all our weekly medical articles at DrDrew.com. And be sure to join our email list at DrDrew.com/contact. And please do tell a friend. We hope you've enjoyed this chapter of the History of Opium, which is sponsored by True Recovery. If you or someone you care for is dealing with addiction, you know that finding a treatment option that works for you can be quite frustrating. Truth is, every patient's needs are different and they are evolving. People behind True Recovery in Orange County, California realize that effective care cannot be a one-size-fits-all. That's why they've developed a comprehensive range of treatments that addresses all the needs of a drug addict and alcoholic, and as well as co-occurring disorders. True Recovery's master-level clinicians maintain small caseloads, allowing them to truly personalize their care. They offer individualized treatment plans from residential to outpatient, always with a holistic approach and a focus on accountability. As the patients become ready, True Recovery offers assistance with life and coping skills, school and vocational coordination, as well as community reintegration support, a critical piece that's often missed by many programs, getting people back to work and back to living. I've spoken with True Recovery's medical director, and I was impressed with the range of therapeutic modalities and psychiatric services. Their experienced team is well equipped to manage patients at all levels of care. To request more information on how True Recovery can provide you personalized care, go to drdrew.com/true. Again, that is drdrew.com/TRUE. We'll see you next week.